This just in, coming from the world of college football, Billy Napier will remain as head football coach of the Florida Gators. Napier's job status had been a pressing topic in Gainesville, with the Gators only 4-4 this year and went just 5-7 last year. Overall, since taking over the job in 2022, Billy Napier's record is 15-18. That's under 500 if you're keeping count. But AD Scott Strickland in a statement saying, quote, "I am confident that Billy will meet the challenges and opportunities ahead. We will work alongside him to support any changes needed to elevate Gator football." So for now, it is still Napier who will be the head man for, we'll see, patrolling the Florida Gators. And let's continue this conversation and bring in our college football experts, Dennis Dodd and Richard Johnson. And of course, I'll get out there and say, yes, I am a Florida alum. I am a proud Gator fan. Dennis, I'm in a group chat full of Gator alum. None of us are happy. That includes me. Why now does Florida come out and make this announcement via Scott Strickland?
Oh, I think there's several aspects to this. I think they've made progress. They've played well and competitive in incredibly, negative situations with the injuries. I think it was 2020 with 7.5 minutes left against Georgia last week, and you're down to your third string walk-on quarterback, and you're still giving Georgia all they want. And I also think that I think Richard will agree that December calendar is just chock full of landmines. If you're going to change coaches, December 6th or something like that is signing day. You've got the portal, you've got the playoffs starting. And I think doing it now sends a message to recruits. I mean, everything's recruiting when you talk about this stuff, that he's going to be back. Didn't use that language. He said he's going to continue, but that Billy's going to be back.
Yeah, Dennis, I think there's a key point in this press release as well that reads, and I'm going to quote it, "In these times of change across college athletics, we are dedicated to a disciplined, stable approach that is focused on long-term sustained success." I think at the end of the day, if they got rid of Billy Napier now, you'd be looking at a situation where Florida would have 4 coaches in 10 years. And that would be a talking point about the Gators' job, instability, all that sort of stuff that comes with that when you chop and change regimes. I also think that there are significant headwinds with the December calendar, just like Dennis said. At the end of the day, you got an early signing period, December 4th through 6th. You've got a transfer portal window that's December 9th through December 28th. And at the end of the day, you also have the college football playoff. And for a program at the caliber of Florida, if they're going to be looking to potentially poach a coach that may be in the college football playoff, that coach is going to be tied up at minimum December 20th. And if a coach that Florida may be targeting wins a first-round playoff game, that's New Year's. I do not think, speaking to sources in the coaching industry, that it is palatable for a coach to leave his playoff team to go coach at another job. I think eventually someone may do it, because that is the nature of college football. But Florida did not want to be the program that went into that uncertain water of what college football now is in December 1st. They didn't want to lead the line there. And so they're going to stick with Billy Napier, at least for the foreseeable future. And I think some of that wording at the top of the announcement is frankly just because they're not announcing a contract extension here. They're just announcing that they're going to stick with the status quo.
Yeah, I think it's just so interesting because you look at it, Dan Mullen, Will Muschamp, McElwain were all fired for doing better than what we've seen from Napier. And Dennis, you mentioned recruiting. The Gators currently 51st in the country for this recruiting class coming up right here. So Richard, I'm curious because you can kind of look at it and you can pinpoint and see the losses that the Gators have. I'm looking right at Tennessee, and you can say the players did their job, but maybe it was mismanagement from Napier when it comes maybe to timeouts or using special teams, and still Florida has had all these issues in year 3. Why do you keep this guy when you've seen all the problems?
Well, at the end of the day, I wonder if there are some staff changes that may be coming to Florida's coaching staff, because your point is well taken, Zach. At the end of the day, Billy Napier and Florida have still mismanaged situations. The special teams inefficiencies and issues that have existed throughout Billy Napier's tenure remain. They allowed a kickoff to be returned for a touchdown against Kentucky. They gave away 3 points at the end of the first half against Tennessee because they had 12 men on the field. It was a penalty. The 10-second runoff was triggered, and they were not able to take 3 points into the half with them. So it is still an issue. There are still operational issues that Florida has on the field that is costing them points and games. But I think at the end of the day, as Florida evaluates the program, Athletic Director Scott Strickland, Florida's administration, and Billy Napier, I think what you're seeing is an alignment around the fact that, hey, we are getting a better effort from the young players. I think if Florida was playing like this at the beginning of the season against Miami and Texas A&M, I'm not even sure this would be a question, because you would be able to say, okay, well, they've at least raised their level of play. I think the fact that they get blown out against Miami, they're not terribly competitive against Texas A&M at home, and then they sort of improve over the course of the season. Yeah, the record's not so great right now, but you are able to chart a level of progress this season, and Florida's banking on that to continue next year.
Yeah, there's another layer to this that I'll get to, but there's one thing. Before the season, I looked at this schedule, and a lot of us saw it, maybe the hardest schedule ever, at least in modern years. And I said at the time, I said, maybe if Florida goes 5-7, Billy deserves an extension, depending on who the 5 are. That still may be the case. They could go 5-7, beat Florida State. But there's another point to this that I just thought of. Florida, like every other school, at least in the Power 2, has to ramp up and get $20.5 million ready for next fall for revenue sharing. You add on top of that what it would take to buy out, Billy, whatever it is, $40 million, whatever's left on his contract in 3 years, and then make the transition to pay the new guy and bring a new staff in. I mean, you may be talking about, I don't know, $100 million or $90 million or something like that to make this change right now. Even in the SEC, even in Florida, you got to think twice before doing something like that.
Dennis, how much do you think that the situation with Florida having an interim president over the school right now, because a lot of fans out there were feeling that Scott Strickland should be in hot water with his job security as well, because you shouldn't be allowed to hire this many new head football coaches. But the situation with the entire administration, since there is not a full-time president, do you think that could affect the reason why we're here with Napier staying around?
I think it could, but I think the reasons we're talking about improvement, playing through injuries, showing better in the second half of the season, and the December calendar are probably the biggest things right now. If Lane Kiffin's not going to come, and it doesn't look like he would, then who is it? Do you want somebody that's still in the playoff? And you're going to have to wait, as Richard said, till at least January 1st if they win that first round game. I think that played more into it. There's been other schools that made this move with interim presidents, and obviously you want the presidents to sign off. He's running the university. I get that, but I think this says a lot about Scott. When this whole thing started with walls closing in on Billy, was Scott Strickland going to be given the chance to make the next hire? In other words, if Billy goes, Scott goes. So I think they're still tied together, but they're obviously going to be back unless the bottom falls out, for at least one more year.
Look, Florida's administration likes the way this football team is being ran by Billy. They don't really get in trouble. There's not negative headlines, that sort of stuff. I think the lack of confidence from Florida's Board of Trustees in Scott Strickland is frankly a talking point that is overblown. My own reporting with Brandon Marcello at CBS Sports back in September sort of got at that aspect. I know a lot of fans are not really thrilled with Scott Strickland in the leadership, but it's just not palatable to hire an athletic director and a school president at the same time, and then potentially a head football coach. That's just a complete and total leadership vacuum. And Florida has shown in the past that it is not a school that has extremely activist university side administration, even though I know boosters are not exactly thrilled with how things are going. So at the end of the day, I think you have to factor that in. Florida moving forward, the point is really well taken that Dennis made about getting your house in order NIL-wise because of what's coming. Florida's got a young roster. They're going to have to try to augment that in the transfer portal. Of course, there are changes that are going to have to be made in this program. But, I think at the end of the day, they sit back and they say, we've got DJ Lagway. We think we can build around him into something that's more of a long-term build. Look, this is the University University of Florida. Nobody wants to hear that it takes time to build a winner. But if you want to compete with what's in Athens, for instance, with those Georgia Bulldogs, that doesn't happen overnight. And I know it's been a while. I know it's been 3 years, and they're still 500. But Florida is looking at this with a long-term outlook.
4-4, still need 2 more wins. The schedule does not look that favorable to pick up those 2 wins, but here we are. Billy Napier will be the head coach for right now. Dennis Dodd and Richard Johnson, thank you so much. Always appreciate the time. And that schedule, this is why it does not look too favorable, because you travel to Texas this weekend. You get to host LSU and Ole Miss before you wrap up the year in Tallahassee at Florida State on November 30th. A Gators team that is 4-4, and with a team with the 51st best recruiting class under Billy Napier, will still have Napier coaching them in the future.